You're watching DD India Global. We'll get your top stories from India and the region. I am Tanvi Taneja, and for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in Washington, D.C., Nick Harper. Nick, good morning to you.
Good morning, Tanvi. It's 7:30 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. It's 1:30 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, Israel's Prime Minister is in Washington, creating very visible divisions over the war in Gaza. And Russia pushes back on Western accusations about its partnership with China. We'll have the details, but first the headlines.
British Foreign Secretary David Lammy begins his two-day visit to India to meet Indian leaders for a reset of the UK-India partnership. ASEAN foreign ministers' meetings kick off in Laos. Foreign ministers of India and China to attend ASEAN, East Asia Summit and ASEAN Regional Forum talks. Russia accuses European leaders of inventing Russia-China threats to keep their people in fear. Ukraine's Dmytro Kuleba discusses ways for fair peace in conflict with Russia with China's Wang Yi. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to address the US Congress today. Families of hostages urge Netanyahu to seal the deal with Hamas immediately during a protest in Washington, D.C. So up first, we start from New Delhi, where British Foreign Secretary David Lammy has reached for a two-day visit. It is the first high-level visit by a British minister to India after the installation of a Labour government in the UK. The British High Commission in New Delhi said that the visit will push for a reset of the UK-India partnership by reinforcing the UK's commitment to securing a bilateral free trade agreement. Lammy is expected to meet India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar. He will head for the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meetings in Laos's capital Vientiane. Dr. Jaishankar will also be travelling to Laos. So ASEAN Foreign Ministers meetings kicked off in Laos on Wednesday. 10 Southeast Asian delegates and foreign ministers are participating in the ASEAN's community building efforts and reaffirming the group's centrality and unity amidst current geopolitical developments. Alongside India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi will be in attendance at the meetings starting 25th of July. Heavy police and armed security presence was seen ahead of the arrivals of foreign ministers and senior officials for these meetings. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar will make back-to-back visits to Laos and Japan to attend meetings related to the ASEAN and Quad. The minister will travel to Vientiane, capital of Laos, from 25th to 27th of July to participate in the foreign ministers' meetings under the ASEAN framework. It includes the ASEAN-India, East Asia Summit and ASEAN Regional Forum meetings. 2024 marks a decade of India's Act East policy, which was announced at the 9th East Asia Summit in 2014. Dr. Jaishankar will travel to Japan from 28th to 30th of July to participate in a meeting of the Quad foreign ministers in Tokyo on the 29th of July, along with his counterparts from Australia, Japan and the US. President of the Inter-Parliamentary Union and Speaker of the National Assembly of Tanzania, Dr. Tulia Ackson, called on the Vice President of India and Chairman of the Indian Parliament's Upper House, Jagdeep Dhankar, in New Delhi on Wednesday. Both leaders held discussions on traditionally close and friendly ties between India and Tanzania, highlighting the significance of parliamentary exchanges in deepening the relation between the two countries. The third meeting of Indian-Russian Intergovernmental Commission on Military and Military Technical Cooperation was held in New Delhi. Working subgroup held discussions focused on strengthening the ongoing defence engagements between the two sides over new initiatives under the existing bilateral defence cooperation mechanism between India and Russia. So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in the United States of America. He will address the US lawmakers in Washington, D.C. today amid growing pressure to end the Gaza conflict. My colleague Nick Harper is in the US Capitol. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Nick, how might the political turbulence shape up Netanyahu's trip and, of course, the Israel-Hamas conflict?
Well, Tanvali, it certainly has the potential to overshadow much of what is happening today, and it will be certainly something that Benjamin Netanyahu and the other US leaders will be watching very, very closely. He's here addressing the US Congress later on Wednesday. It comes at a time when the US and Israeli politics are going through fragile times. The long-time Israeli leader will speak to a joint meeting of the Senate and the House of Representatives, passing British wartime leader Winston Churchill, who made such addresses 3 times during his time in office. Netanyahu landed in Washington on Monday, the day after President Joe Biden announced he was quitting the race for a second term and endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris as his successor. Netanyahu's speech before Congress comes in response to an invitation initially extended by the Republican House Speaker, Mike Johnson. Vice President and presumptive Democratic Party nominee Kamala Harris has been careful not to publicly diverge from Biden's staunch support of Israel. Thousands of protesters gathered in the US Capitol in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday, where Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will address lawmakers later on Wednesday. Netanyahu will also be meeting with President Joe Biden and Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump. Jagriti Dave has more.
As security is tightened ahead of Mr. Netanyahu's speech on Wednesday, pro-Palestinian activists are angry about Washington's support for Tel Aviv and its assault on Gaza, which has killed nearly 40,000 civilians in the enclave, according to its Hamas-run health ministry. The Israeli operation was launched after Hamas's October the 7th attack, where around 1,200 people were killed, according to Israel's government. The war has sparked protests across college campuses here in the US, and this week demonstrators will be in Washington with demands for a ceasefire and for the US to stop giving aid to Israel. Relatives of hostages taken by Hamas are also gathering on the National Mall to highlight their plight and call for their release. Mr. Netanyahu's speech to Congress also comes at a tricky time for US-Israeli relations. Mr. Netanyahu has hit back against US President Joe Biden, who's been increasingly critical of Israel's strategy in Gaza and has been putting pressure on his ally to prevent the conflict spilling over into the wider region. It also comes at a challenging time for Washington, with Joe Biden dropping out of the presidential race and endorsing his vice president instead. Kamala Harris has said she won't preside over the Senate for the Israeli leader's speech, with an aide citing a scheduling conflict, but others have interpreted this as an indication of just how divisive Mr. Netanyahu's visit is for the Democrats, some of whom have indicated they may boycott the speech. Jagriti Dave in Washington, reporting for DD India.
Meanwhile, Israeli forces carried out new raids in the Gaza Strip on Wednesday, just hours before Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is giving that address here in Washington. Israel's military, which is trying to eradicate the Islamist military group Hamas after the October 7th attack on Israel, said it had been operating in areas from which fighters had been able to fire rockets into Israel and attack Israeli troops. Israeli forces also carried out airstrikes on several areas of central and northern Gaza. Israel has said that its action was intended to prevent Hamas from regrouping. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who's in the US, told families of hostages held in Gaza that a deal would secure their release and that deal could be near. Meanwhile, an Israeli negotiation team is due on Thursday to resume talks that would include hostages being released in return for Palestinian prisoners who are being held in Israeli jails. Israel informed Egypt that an Israeli delegation would arrive in Cairo on Wednesday evening local time. Months of efforts mediated by both Egypt and Qatar to reach a ceasefire gained momentum in recent weeks under a proposal outlined by US President Joe Biden back in May. Well, to get more on all of this and to break it down, we're joined now live by Sarah Coates from Tel Aviv. Sarah, let's focus first on Benjamin Netanyahu's address to Congress. What can we expect from that?
Hello there, Nick. This will be Netanyahu's fourth address to Congress. More than any other foreign leader, he is expected to deliver a unifying address, also to thank President Biden for his ongoing support and also for the support of the United States during this current war. Now, Netanyahu isn't saying what he will be talking about during this congressional address, but we do know, according to sources very close to Netanyahu, that he will be discussing the release of these remaining Israeli hostages, also the atrocities of October 7, and the threat of Iran. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu is really trying to assert his leadership or reassert his leadership in the United States and also at home here in Israel, where he's coming under a lot of pressure. The latest poll released here in Israel shows that more than 70% of Israelis believe that Netanyahu should step down over his handling of the war and what is perceived to be his inability to get these remaining hostages released. So certainly coming, as you mentioned there, at a very crucial time and at a time of upheaval in the United States, Nick.
And talk to me about the northern border. We've seen an escalation there, that border that Israel shares with Lebanon.
You're certainly right, and this is something, Nick, that is of great concern, not just to Israel, but to its closest ally, the United States. Now, what we've been hearing today from the Israeli military is that troops have been drilling in these northern areas after this war plan was approved a few weeks ago to actually go into Lebanon. So there is a lot of fear that this may happen and this could potentially spark a regional war. And what's been seen really over these past few months is an escalation on that border between Israel and Lebanon, these cross-border tit-for-tat strikes between Israel and Hezbollah, with a number of large fires still burning in Israel's north, the result of rocket fire from southern Lebanon, and Israel continuing to carry out these so-called targeted strikes of senior Hezbollah commanders also hitting Hezbollah infrastructure over the past few hours. So certainly a very worrying situation, and a situation that the international community is really hoping to bring under control very soon, Nick.
Sarah, thank you. Sarah Coates joining us live from Tel Aviv. Well, moving on now to Russia's war with Ukraine, and Russia has accused European leaders of trying to frighten people with what it said were invented threats that Russia and China allegedly pose to the continent. European leaders have repeatedly warned that Moscow could expand the conflict in Ukraine, something it calls a special military operation, and expand it to other European countries. However, Russia has denied such intentions. Meanwhile, Russia has also said that France's refusal to accredit some Russian journalists to cover the Paris Olympics on security grounds is a sign of paranoia. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba is in China until Thursday. On Tuesday, he met with China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi and discussed ways to achieve a fair peace in the war with Russia. Kuleba's visit is the first by a high-ranking Ukrainian official since Russia's full-scale February 2022 invasion. China, the world's second-largest economy, has not publicly condemned Russia for that invasion. Well, that's it from me here in Washington. Tanvi, I'm handing it back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Nick. Nick Harper joining us from Washington, D.C. And now more news from Europe. A court in Berlin has ruled that Germany must improve its air quality standards in order to meet European pollution targets. The court ruled in favor of a leading environmental group that had sued the German government recently. This is one of a flurry of recent suits by activists and environmental organizations against the government's climate policies. Meanwhile, flights resumed at the German airport after climate activists had halted air traffic after several hours. This climate activist group was called Last Generation, who had glued themselves to the runway. Sadly, stranded passengers had no understanding of the protest. And now we are joined by DW's Julia Southerly from Berlin for more on this story. Hi, Julia. Why are environmental groups taking the German government to court?
Well, this latest case where the environmental group claimed that the German government's air quality program wasn't going far enough in reaching European targets, but also in protecting its own citizens from pollution. This is one case that we saw succeeding in the court. The court agreed with this claim, even though there is still a possibility to appeal this result. But this is only one of different cases that we've seen recently over the last few years where environmental groups and activists have been going to the courts to criticize the German government's climate policies and to push for a more active, a faster action against climate change. And some of these cases have already been successful. A famous one is from 2021 when a court ruled against the German government, and at the time it was led by Chancellor Angela Merkel, and the court claimed that the government had to change and improve its climate policies because without acting more to stop or reduce its carbon emissions, the government was basically going against the constitutional right of young people in Germany and of future generations to have a safe and healthy environment in which to live, which would be threatened by uncontrolled climate change. And we see also with the environmental groups now, they are also seeing, for example, extreme weather events occurring in Europe that are connected to climate change. For example, we've seen heavy floods in the south of Germany last month where 5 people were killed. At the same time, we see some record droughts in the south of Europe, for example, on the Italian island of Sicily. And these are all elements that are upping the game and pushing the issue of climate change more in the debate.
And when it comes to reaching climate goals, targets, how is Germany performing on that aspect?
Well, Germany has set itself some quite ambitious goals. For example, it wants to become carbon neutral, climate neutral by 2045. That means it does not want to be still emitting carbon into the atmosphere. And we've seen some progress on this front. For example, data shows that in the first half of this year, 65% of German electricity has come from renewable sources. We've also seen that in 2023, Germany has installed a record number of solar power systems. But at the same time, we also see that this might not be enough for Germany to reach the targets that it has set for itself. We've heard from a panel of climate experts that advises the German government that Germany risks missing its 2030 climate goals, and especially the transport and the construction sector are not doing enough to reduce their CO2 emissions. And this is also where we've seen environmental organizations wanting to push for a faster and more effective move away from fossil fuels and a reduction in emissions.
We leave it here. Thank you, Julia Southerly, reporting from DW Berlin. So from one airport to another, at least 18 people were killed after a Soria Airlines plane crashed at the Tribhuvan International Airport in Nepal's capital Kathmandu on Wednesday. A press statement issued by the Civil Aviation Authority of Nepal said that the Soria Airlines domestic plane, which was scheduled to head to the resort town of Pokhara, took off at 11:11 in the morning local time from Kathmandu airport and turned right, but crashed moments later in the eastern section of the airport. The crash occurred after the Pokhara-bound flight suffered a runway excursion during takeoff. The plane was carrying crew members and technicians to Pokhara for maintenance checks. Domestic flights have been affected as the airport had been temporarily shut. And now on to Taiwan, where Typhoon Gaeme has begun covering the eastern parts of the country since Wednesday morning local time. Typhoon Gaeme is expected to be the strongest storm to hit Taiwan in 8 years. It is set to make landfall on the northeastern coast on Wednesday evening. Flights have been delayed, markets are shut, and at least one person was reported dead. Taiwan's military remains on standby mode amid these torrential rains. Ahead of the landfall, more than 2,000 people have been evacuated from sparsely populated mountainous areas amid a high risk of landslides. After the typhoon makes its expected landfall on Wednesday, it is likely to hit the southeastern Chinese province of Fujian late on Thursday afternoon. And now we take a look at what else is making news around the world. Croatia's Karin Sea, also a major tourist spot of the country, is eyeing the title of being the world's smallest sea. Spread in just 6 square kilometers of area, it is also part of the Adriatic Sea. Volunteers in Algeria have been working to rescue and rehabilitate flamingos that are dwindling in numbers due to severe drought in the region. So far, 283 young pink flamingos have been relocated to safer places. Displacement camps in the second largest country of the African continent, Congo, have been hit by the Mpox variant, an escalation of an earlier Mpox outbreak that claimed more than 1,100 lives since last year. Experts and engineers at the Capgemini and Solar Airship are working together on a solar-powered airship that will operate without fossil fuels. In a pilot run, the airship aims to tour the world solely on self-generated power. Now, a bit on a slice of India at the India Pavilion on display at the 46th session of the World Heritage Committee meet. The meet is being hosted by India and it offers diversity to the world delegates. Bharat Mandapam in New Delhi is the point of attraction for visitors. The India Pavilion looks forward to taking a bit of India back to their land. Anil Thomas reports.
India hosts the 46th session of the World Heritage Committee from July 21st to 31st. Parallel to the plenary session being held at the main hall of the Bharat Mandapam, an Incredible India exhibition has been set up depicting heritage, landmarks and cultural legacy of the country. Scale models of forts associated with Maratha King Chhatrapati Shivaji, colorful stalls of various states and live displays of craftsmanship were part of the thematic pavilion at the World Heritage Committee meeting venue to display the spirit of Incredible India.
On one end, you see the forts of Maharashtra, which exhibit our rich heritage in fortifications and how Shivaji Maharaj and the Marathas have established their legacy in the country. And on the other, you see the culture of Rajasthan, the intangible elements of Kolkata. So it's a mixture of both tangible and intangible because that's what UNESCO's theme is all made of.
The gateway leads to a wide open space where different aspects of India's heritage have been displayed from replicas of monumental sites. Visitors can also see live demonstration of Indian craftsmanship.
It's very amazing to see such diverse range of culture of India, including traditional crafts, music and cuisines. So I really enjoyed visiting every corner of exhibition.
The special exhibition highlights India's rich cultural heritage, age-old civilization, geographical diversity and tourism destination, along with modern developments in the field of information technology and infrastructure. Anil Thomas for DD India from New Delhi.
And for all the cinema buffs out there, a new trailer for the sequel of the thriller film Joker called Joker Folie à Deux has been released. Actors Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga take to the stage to cause chaos in a musical turn of events. Take a look.
The sun comes.
You're Joker.
Look around. Look at all these people. Be happy again. I got the sneaking suspicion that we're not giving the people what they want.
It's okay, baby. Let's give the people what they want.
So Joker 2 is set to be released in US and UK cinemas on October 4th this year. That's all for this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on our different social media handles. And for those on the go, you can catch all the latest news and updates on our DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. So we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja. From my entire team here in New Delhi and elsewhere in the world, thank you for watching. Namaskar.